Glimpses of Mother's divine compassion. Leela 1. It was Easter 1942. I had gone to meet Mataji in the Kishanpur ashram on Dehradun Mussoorie Road. This was my first visit to Ma after I had met her in Lucknow a few months ago. On reaching Dehradun, I came to know that some devotees were expected to come from Delhi for their annual kirtan in Mataji's presence. It was to take place on Easter Sunday from sunrise to sunset. On the previous evening, all arrangements were completed. Some of the Dehradun devotees wanted to give a feast, a bandara, on the occasion and sought Ma's permission. She asked, "How many people are you going to provide for?" One of the devotees said, 200. Mataji remained silent. Another said, "Ma, if you permit, we can make arrangements for, say, 300. Still she kept quiet, and a third devotee said, "Ma, without your permission, nothing can be done." She looked up and said, "All right, let us hope that your wishes are fulfilled." The market was about 5 miles away from the ashram. Provisions had to be obtained at the earliest. The bhaktas were busy. The next morning, the kirtan started with due solemnity. The hall and the verandas were all packed, the crowd even overflowing into the garden. Besides listening to the kirtan, everyone wanted to have a glimpse of Ma. The beggars and the sweepers of the locality also turned up. Even passerbys on their way to Mussoorie and other curious sightseers and tourists, on noticing a crowd, flocked into the ashram. At about noon, Mataji withdrew from the hall and retired to her small room upstairs. Then she summoned those who were arranging the feast and asked them if they were ready. One of them said frankly, "Mataji, our arrangements are complete, but we have had only about 400 people in view. Now we find that more than 500 are to be fed." And another devotee said, "The market is far off, otherwise something could be done." While a third one pleaded, "If we put off the meal until a little later, we might manage." Mataji could no longer remain silent and said, "It is already noon. Are they all not hungry?" And then she went into silence for a bit before adding, "No, they are to be fed and fed immediately." And she stopped for a moment and then spoke with a clear voice, "Make arrangements for serving them now. The meal should be over within an hour and a half. Not one should go away without food. Leave this body alone. We part only if there be any shortage. Otherwise, do not come to me." I was present there. We all felt uncomfortable. But Mataji said with perfect composure, "Go and do as you are told. Do not forget, none should go hungry. Don't be unhappy. God's service must be done with a cheerful heart." I was perplexed. I was only an onlooker and could not help in any way. I made up my mind, however, to avoid the meal. I no longer felt hungry. But after a few minutes, Guru Priya Didi came to me in haste, saying, "Dada, please come soon. Haven't you heard Ma's command? Everything must be over in an hour and a half. Won't you help by joining us without delay?" I cast my thoughts aside. Mother had offered the boon of this meal, and as her child, I must enjoy it. I took my seat with the crowd and began to eat the delicious things provided. Everyone was happy. Those who served seemed quite free from anxiety. I ate almost double the usual quantity. The meal proceeded in the midst of a good deal of laughter and merriment, with occasional shouts of "Jai Ma." After the repast, I went upstairs but did not want Mataji to discover me. I stood behind the door of her room and then, with a heart filled with serene happiness, prostrated, whispering to myself all the while, Ma, bless me that I may be worthy of a feast like this, which brings your grace. Those in charge of the Bandara were coming up to report to Mataji, since the stipulated hour and a half was over. They opened the door and I found Mataji sitting in her usual tranquil mood. She smiled and asked, "What news?" The devotee cheerfully replied, "Ma, everyone has been fed sumptuously. We never had so much pleasure in serving food." Mataji asked, "What about your provisions?" And one of the devotees burst out, "More than 500 people have eaten, and yet there is enough left for 200 more." Mataji said, "This is very good. Not a particle should be wasted. Let those who come or are staying here be fed again in the evening. Everything must be consumed today. If it cannot be eaten here, let it be given to those outside who are hungry." We all let her relax for an hour or so. Our minds were busy with the laws of arithmetic. How could eatables for 400 people satisfy more than 500, and yet enough be left over for 200 more? It was indescribably baffling indeed. Leela 2. Shall I relate another incident of the same afternoon when the 5 sadhus arrived from Hardwar? There, at a religious meeting, a heated controversy had arisen between them over some passages of the scriptures, for they were of different schools of thought. It was about to end in bitterness when some gentlemen implored them to accept arbitration. It was somewhat difficult to find a suitable arbiter who would be acceptable for purposes of settling the disputed points of the sastras, particularly to sadhus belonging to different sects. At last, they suddenly agreed to refer the matter to Sri Anandamayi Ma. So they had come to her. They entered the ashram scowling and full of gloom. When they were taken upstairs to Mataji's room, I followed them. Briefly apprised of the situation, Mataji smiled and entreated them to be seated in their daughter's room. Then she asked for fruits and sweets to be brought for their refreshment, but they refused to eat. But Mataji insisted, saying, "When you have come to your little daughter, you will have to pay heed to her wishes." This was not a mere request, but a command of love. So the sadhus could no longer refuse. Then they asked to be left alone with Ma. After an hour, the door was opened. They came out full of smiles, almost embracing one another, and Mataji's laughter filled the room. I could not help wondering how Ma, untutored in the sastras, could have settled the dispute. Leela 3. In 1942, Mataji spent part of the summer in Bhimtal, and I was privileged to stay with her. She was repeatedly entreated to visit some ardent devotees in the neighborhood. She was to return in 3 or 4 days, but actually stayed away for 8 or 10 days. 4 or 5 of us remained in Bhimtal. The weather suddenly changed. There were showers and it grew cold. With Mother away, there was no warmth left in our hearts. My old trouble, asthma, reappeared. I had great difficulty in breathing during the night. Incessant coughing forced me to sit up. I thought of Mataji. When should she come? Just before leaving, she had told me, "Baba, stay here like a good boy." Since I had not been a good boy, I was visited with this malady. How long could I wait without treatment? I wanted to see a doctor in Lucknow, but of course with Ma's permission, but she had not come yet. At last she appeared one evening at dusk. Someone who had accompanied her came miming to my room and said, Dada, how are you? Ma was very anxious to return on your account. For the last few days she had been repeatedly saying that you were not well. Are you not well? Mataji has come. You will soon be all right. I was no doubt relieved by her return, but did not show satisfaction, as I was inwardly displeased and unhappy. When she knew of my illness, why did she not come earlier? The person who came to me to report about Ma's return went back to her, perhaps to inform her about me. On her way, she paused for a moment at the door of my room and, looking towards me, said, Baba, are you oppressed with trouble? Don't you worry. Everything will be all right. Then she went away. Her talk fell flat on me, and I found no solace. I now had to make up my mind to return to Lucknow the next morning for treatment. I did not go to Ma. People flocked to her room, and I could hear them laugh and rejoice. Perhaps she was relating some of her experiences, but I was in no mood for such anecdotes. The night was fast approaching. My mind was overcast with the thought of the troubles and vexations in store for me during the night. Everyone there was so happy, with the sole exception of my poor little self. Whether I ate anything that evening I do not remember, but being solitary, brooding, and cheerless, I was feeling that Mataji was being cruel, very cruel to me. I tried to console myself with the thought that what was to happen must happen, and that there was no help, and I reflected bitterly, what am I to Ma? Such considerations tormented me and made me even more miserable. It was past midnight. The paroxysms of asthma, the difficulty in breathing, and the strain of sitting up for a long time with practically no food were more than I could endure silently. I came out of my room to go to Mataji. The door of her room was ajar. A lamp was burning inside. Mataji could not possibly have seen me, as I stopped just behind the door. I hesitated to enter and thought of returning. And then I heard Ma's voice. Come in. My burden was already considerably lightened as I went inside. Ma said, Baba, you are suffering much, aren't you? I am, I answered. I am unable to lie down and sleep. You will be all right if you can just lie down and go to sleep, replied Mataji. But this is not possible. I have not slept for several nights, and I am unable to stand it any longer. And Ma said, after a slight pause, Do you keep a lamp burning in your room? I don't. Do you keep the doors and windows open? Well, now I keep one window open for ventilation. Do you use a blanket or a quilt? A blanket, I replied. That is all right. And then she was silent, and I waited. And finally she said, Will you do one thing? I will, Ma. What is it? Close your doors and windows as usual. Put out your lamp, and then go to bed. Before lying down, make a clear resolve that you are going to sleep, and then lie down for rest. Will you do this? I looked dully towards the wall and said, I have done all these many times with no effect. But Ma said with some warmth, Do it once again, as you are now told, and do not worry. I did not know what to say, and I kept quiet. Then I slowly left the room. I remembered her advice. Do not worry. But my mind was occupied. How will it be possible? I love Ma, so maybe it is possible. If I fix my attention on her, love alone can calm down all mental disturbances. So thoughts like these continued to ruffle up my mind as I went to my room. I did as I had been ordered. Before lying down, I sat on my bed with folded hands in order to say my prayers, but I could not pray. All my pent-up feelings broke out into sobs, and I burst into tears. I needed rest. Would the Divine Mother grant me what I needed? I lay down, and within a minute or so my eyes closed and I fell asleep without any effort. Next morning I got up late. When I opened the door of my room, Lena, a sweet little girl visitor who is no more alive, came running and said, "Dada, were you sleeping? Mataji inquired about you several times." I felt ashamed of myself and went straight to Mother's room. She smiled and said, "Well, Baba, did you get sleep?" I have never had such a sound sleep in my life before. I felt I was sleeping in the lap of the Mother. Yes, it is the Mother's lap where everyone sleeps. She is loving. Is not sleep a manifestation of Mother? That evening, I joined the happy congregation in Ma's room and laughed and jested with them. But all of a sudden, I remembered that the night was approaching and feared my trouble might recur. Mataji could read my thoughts and at once said, "Baba, do as you did earlier. Better go now and relax." "I did last night just as you did, but you should go to and prostrate inwardly, praying for the blessing, and retire." I had plenty of sleep that night as well and had almost become normal. The third night again, Mataji's counsel bore fruit, and I no more feared the recurrence of my troubles. The next morning I went to Ma when she was alone and said, "It seems to me that I have been cured. There is no trouble now. But do please tell me how you have cured me. You did not give me any medicine, nor did you touch me. When you had looked at me, I could hardly look you in the face, so full of worries and anxieties was I. When you talked, I examined myself and found that I was not worthy of being your son. Tell me, Ma, how have you cured me? Or tell me what to do if the disease recurs." Mataji looked at me with great concern and said, "Why should the disease recur? It is already gone." I said, "Shall I take it that you have cured me?" Mataji looked up with a smile and said, "You should know that you have cured yourself." I exclaimed in surprise, "What?" Mataji repeated with great affection, "It is you who have cured yourself." I could not understand, but there was no mistaking her love and compassion. I wanted no more. Some of my more skeptical friends asked me at intervals, "Did you have any more attacks?" And I am happy to be able to answer them all in the negative. Jai Ma. Leela 4. One more episode of a still more intimate nature. A son's relation with his mother must always be somewhat personal, but the feeling of love and gratitude or the repentance impels me to put on record some of my experiences so that others may also share them. It all happened in the summer of 1943. I had gone to the ashram in Raipur, Dehradun, for a short respite. On arrival, I came to know that Mataji had also come from Almora in connection with some yajna or sacrificial ceremony at the Sahasrishara, about 5 miles from Raipur, and I was staying there. I felt happy and eventually met her there the same day. I found her in her usual tranquil mood, shedding happiness all around. 2 or 3 days later, when the actual rites and ceremonies were over, she came to the Raipur ashram for a halt. She was to return to Almora very soon. I was a mere witness to the daily gathering of men and women who came from Dehradun and attended on her. I had so far no opportunity to meet her in private. When at last I did so, she said to me, "You are also going to Almora." Mataji, I replied, I have not brought the necessary outfit, and Almora is a cold place. It does not matter. You will be given all you need. I was at the point of arguing, but Mataji said, It is settled then that you are going to Almora. I remember the state of revolt I was in at that time. I was a prey to the blackest despair. I knew I was helpless and yet resented the idea of being helped. I wanted to be left alone. That was why I had chosen to come to Raipur, a comparatively solitary place, in order to regain the composure of my mind. But Mataji took the task into her hands. I had to accompany her. We were a party of 4, including Mataji. The story of our journey from Dehradun to Kathgodam alone would fill pages. But I must hasten to that part of the story which concerns us here. Just before we reached Kathagodam, Mataji disclosed her intention of going to Nainital. This is just like Mataji. She never announces beforehand what she is going to do. And I was perplexed. I said, I am not going. What is the matter with you? Said Ma. Nainital is a very cold place, colder than Almora, and you know I have no warm clothes with me. But Mataji interrupted me. That is known. You will get all you need, so come along. Our stay in Nainital will be very short, just 3 or 4 days. Then you will also proceed to Nainital. I had no inclination to go to Nainital, so I looked around and said, Mataji, you have got so much luggage with you. Allow me to go ahead to Almora and take the extra luggage with me. Those are things meant for the ashramites of Almora. Why carry them unnecessarily to Nainital? Mataji seemed to consider my suggestion and then said, All right, if you want to go, then it cannot be helped. It was midday. Kathagodam was hot and stuffy. Some lemonade was prepared and given to us. Fruit was also served. Mataji took pains to explain to me all about the road from Almora motor station to the ashram. It was 2 miles off, but she told me not to take the undulating bridle path, although it was a shortcut. According to her, the motor road was always to be preferred, considering my age and strength. I was not paying much heed to these details, as I thought these were known to me owing to my long stay as a teacher at Almora 20 years earlier. Yet I was not altogether inattentive, because whatever Mataji says, howsoever light her words, commands attention, partly because of her charming manner. She then gave me her hurricane lantern and instructed me to be very careful on my way. I thought this was but the outcome of a mother's anxiety for her child. I remember boarding the mail car and Mataji standing there watching it go. I felt proud of the occasion. As soon as the car began to move, I felt very unhappy and forlorn. Why did I choose to leave Ma? The car was ascending the road and the landscape should have attracted me, but everything appeared so humdrum and hackneyed to me. Why did I not go with Mataji? There was none to talk to me. I was sitting beside the driver and thinking of Mataji. Sometimes I would doze off, and in this manner the tedious journey at last came to an end. It was dark when I alighted at Almora station. I remembered Mataji had given me a lantern. How very considerate indeed she was. She had anticipated its need, although I had no idea then. The servants picked up the luggage and began to move off. I had given them positive instructions of the route as Mataji had told me, but they chose the shortcut. I discovered it too late. It was no longer possible to retrace my steps. So with some apprehension, I followed them with unsteady steps. The path became narrow, craggy, and full of sudden ups and downs. I would survey a few feet of ground with the lantern, then plod on. My nervousness increased, and I almost seemed to lose my grip over myself. We had then almost reached the ashram, and my foot slipped. I stumbled and fell down. One of the servants threw off his load and came running. My hands were bruised and my thighs bled. I had also received a severe jerk in my hip. Nevertheless, I stood up and began to reprimand the servants. But was it their fault? Like good brothers, they took me to the ashram where I lay down as I reached my journey's end. When Mataji arrived 3 days later, I was somewhat better, but still confined to bed. The inmates of the ashram had given me blankets and everything I needed. They were extremely attentive to me, and I should have been happy. But the one question that continued always to vex and torment me was, if Mataji had known beforehand of the impending accident, why had she not told me about it? When Mataji came, I looked eagerly forward to winning her sympathy. So on her approach, I said, "Ma, I had an accident." But to my mortification, I found her stiff. She said, "I do not want to hear." And she moved in another direction to attend to some sadhus who had come with her. It was a sharp rebuff. 2 or 3 days later, when the sadhus had left for Badranath and the ashram had become comparatively quiet, Mataji came to me and said, "Now, what about the accident you had?" I said, "Mataji, the other day I wanted to tell you, but you did not want to hear. Today you wish to know, but I do not feel like speaking." Mataji said, "It was for getting this reply from you that the question was asked." I could no longer endure my condition. I said, "You knew of the accident beforehand, but never," I said a word about it. Instead, you gave me instructions to be followed." Mataji was listening, and I continued, "If you think that I am grown up enough to follow your commandments, I must make it clear that I do not feel worthy or competent enough to receive your advice and follow it. I think I am yet an undeveloped child in that respect. If you can accompany your child in all his troubles and ordeals, I remain with you. If not, let us part company. The child is sure to perish. Who can enable a motherless child to survive?" I do not know why I spoke in this strain. It was not like a child would make, but I had no time to analyze myself. Perhaps I was incapable of it. Mataji looked blank like a white sheet of paper. The next moment there was a great change in her face. I could discern there all my faults written as if on a piece of paper. She had taken upon herself the burden of my heart. I knelt down at her feet, and my tears showed that I could no longer think of separation. Jai Ma.